Hey folks, how y'all doing? Happy New Year, compliments of the season, Merry Christmas. Listen, I so excited about doing the show this evening. I clean forget to even put a title for it. I guess I'm gonna have to edit that later and put that in. Hi Lenleys, hi Neil, hi Paula, hi Carla. How you doing? Hi Madam Moringa, Happy New Year to you. Debbie Davidson, Barbara Roberts, Barbara Jenkins, Veronica George. Way boy, Ollie was here on time and present. So, hi. Compliments of the season. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, wherever it is I may have forgotten. And I'm a little nasal because I can't say had because I'm still in the process. I'm still in the throes of it. I have the flu. There is this flu going around that when you have not been sick for 3 years, because I didn't get sick the entire duration of lockdown. So from 2020 to, I would say 2 weeks ago, no, maybe 1 week ago, because I got sick just before Christmas. No, I hadn't been sick, not even a flu, no sniffles, anything like that. So when you get a flu 3 years after not having had a flu, it just knocks you down. I wasn't even sure I'd be able to do this live, but by today's what, Sunday? So by Thursday, Friday, I started to feel like a human being again. And I say, okay, all right, yeah, we're doing it because, well, we jamming still. We here, right? All kind of thing could happen, but we still gonna be here. Give me 2 seconds. Let me open the door for Stella. Come, baby. Come, sweetheart. Come on. Right. So Stella going and take up she position on the couch. Yay! She just had 2 treats. So I'm sure she's very happy after having had 2 treats. So she will settle herself down, push the bags aside if you need to push the bags aside. So Happy New Year from Stella and Starboy as well. All of us, we've been here just kind of chilling. Hi OC, love you too. Hi Candace Santana, Lisa Beckles, Rosanna Glasgow, Demeter Maria, I hope I get that correct, Demeter Maria, Merlene West, Petal George. It has been a while because I would have done a live a couple of weeks ago to talk about the THA things, and then after that we did, we had a break, and now I'm here to do this. What was that? Do you think Point Kumana Sharon is saying that she thinks Skinny Fabulous's song, let me add it to the broadcast so people would see it. She thinks Skinny Fabulous's song Sauce would be a good audition. I have to go and listen to the song first. I haven't heard it, and in all fairness, I haven't heard music from the season yet because I haven't started listening to music from the season. So I can't say. When I hear it, I go decide. And if it, once it's a nice tune, once it catchy, once I feeling it, yeah. Well, you know me, I like to play soca and calypso on my program to kind of sync in with things. So 2022 was, for me at any rate, a hell of a year. Was that COVID season 2? Well, it's not COVID that I have because I did the tests, put the swab high up in my nose and sneeze down the place, and I run water, and when I eventually wait my 10 minutes or 15 minutes, it said that it was negative for COVID, but definitely positive for a flu, I could tell you that. Yes, Barbara, sorry to hear that you caught it after running away from it for 3 years. I'm hoping that you are recovering. So for me, 2022 was a hell of a year. Not only in a good way. I mean, yes, there were lots of good things that happened for me in 2022. Personally and work-wise, yes. And then personally and work-wise, it was also, right? There are lots going on for 2022 that I was like, I would say easily the highlights for me of 2022 would be my two dogs. All right, there's a lot that I learned from having two dogs. There's a lot of happiness they brought to my life having these two dogs, and there's also a lot of stress that having these two dogs brought to my life. But you know what? I would not give them up for the world. So what else went on with me that was very positive? There are a couple new friends that I made this year. And normally as an adult, it's not that easy to be making friends. I mean, you'll have acquaintances, colleagues, but friends, not necessarily. So there are a couple new friends that I made this year. And it's been a really nice and interesting relationship, a series of relationships to be exploring. The negatives, oh my goodness. I had to go back out to face work from September gone, and it was rough. It was not a pleasant, seamless experience. I was back out on the campus. There was so much face-to-face that wasn't working, so much that was not in place, and it felt just as stressful as when we'd had to go virtual like that. But in going virtual like that, because I controlled the environment, I control what my study and the setup at home was going to be like, it was not that hard a transition for me. But going back out face to face and just feeling like the workspace was not ready to have you back out of the workspace, that was draining for me. It was very draining. So those are what would be, I would say, some of my highlights. What are some of your highlights? Feel free to share it in the comment thread, and I'll put it up on I'll share it up on the screen as we're going through the live. Yes, Debbie, I got Starboy and Stella, and the thing. Oh yes, and the Aquaponics. Thank you for reminding me, Osei. So the Aquaponics. Listen to me. One of the things that I'm going to be working on, because I don't really do resolutions per se, but one of the things that I'm going to be working on harder is my aquaponics system. Why? Because Stella and Starboy give that system some real pressure in the last few months. And then going back out face to face, I didn't have as much time to be attending to it during the day. So the fish are fine, the fish are being fed, but the plant side of things, I haven't been renewing things, I haven't been trimming things. So right now it just looks very lush and very dense because there is a lot of poi and a lot of mint and a lot of shadow benny and what else inside there? I'm forgetting, chive and garlic onions, but it just looks very messy, and there's a lot more that I could be growing in the system right now, like spinach and pak choy and stuff, so I need to get back into it. Hi Devon Seals with your quiet fireworks. Thank you so much for having silent fireworks, because all you know me, I'm not a fan of the fireworks, and I feel very soon me and Mr. Fireworks going to square off, because I ain't thrilled about the stress, the abuse that citizens who not into fireworks have to deal up with. I feel like they should centralize fireworks displays for Christmas and All Years and Independence, right? Or whichever holidays people want to have fireworks set off for. It should be a centralized thing. Let people in the community talk to the councillor, talk to the regional corporation, and they make the arrangements to go and do the fireworks display in a field somewhere where it's safe, and make sure the community is alerted to the fact that there's going to be a fireworks display so people could secure the animals, and you have it for a fixed period of time. This business of fireworks going off whenever people feel like setting it off, in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, all evening long. While we're doing this live, we might get some fireworks, because where I am in Diego Martin, people setting off fireworks whenever they feel like it, whatever hour of the day or night. So I'm not in agreement with that. Yes, I could grasp that there are people who like fireworks, but you also have to grasp that there are people who are not into fireworks for one reason or the other. Some people might be elderly. Some people might be ailing. Some people might have animals. Some people might be like me. Even before I had 2 dogs, I was not into fireworks because I'm not into loud noises. I'm just not into loud noises. I don't understand how people just carry sound system to the beach. That's one of my pet peeves. To pick up myself and go to the beach to sit down and enjoy the atmosphere, the sound of waves and wind and all of those things. And then I have to be dealing up with people who come with their Bluetooth speakers and making noise. It's the same reason I don't really go to popular rivers, because you go to popular rivers and it's a fete, right? And if I'm going outdoors, I'm not going outdoors to enjoy noise. I'm going outdoors to enjoy, well, certainly not human noise. I'm going outdoors to enjoy a different kind of background sound. So I'm not into all of that sort of old noise. Thank you for all of the compliments. I'm seeing you all saying some very positive things about me. Madam Moringa says that she's going to be growing over 3,000 in veggies. Oh, right, you grew over 3,000. That is over 3,000 what, Madam Moringa? Over 3,000 types of vegetables, over 3,000 pounds in vegetables, $3,000 in vegetables. You know, talk to us. Let us know what has went on for you. Was that I'm no longer on Facebook? No, I'm not doing the show on Facebook anymore. Mark Zuckerberg just be giving me too much stress. There's all kinds of restrictions on my accounts for all kind of foolish things that, you know, where people report the page for this, that, and the other. And I don't have the energy for that nonsense anymore. So YouTube works for me. I'm going to continue with YouTube. Candace Santana says she was able to present and work on policy and climate change. Oh, good stuff, Candace. Good stuff. Let me see. I'm just looking at some of the comments here, going through the comments. Hi, $3,000. Great, Madam Moringa. That's good stuff. Good stuff with you and the vegetable growing. Because I know one of the things that you were very focused on this year was getting your business, your small business, back up and running. And of course, in 2023, I want to spend some of the shows talking about small businesses and talking about how we can continue to work on small businesses. Debbie, you left Facebook? Ay. So, I've been considering leaving Facebook. As a matter of fact, I have been battling for some months now. I would say easily the latter half of 2022. I was thinking, I'm just going to deactivate all of my accounts. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, everything. Just deactivate all of my accounts. And Tech Guy talked me out of it. He was like, nah, you need to at least maintain a presence and continue doing the show, blah, 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 blah. So you all have Tech Guy to thank for me still being here doing the show. Because honestly, there are days when I find social media so draining. So yeah, I felt like I would just get rid of all of my accounts and say thank you. It's been a great ride. But nah, I'm still here. I'm still going to be doing the show. So where I want to start, boy, where I want to start. Come here, get down to where I want to start. So we're going to talk about some good news first. We're going to talk about some of the good news, some of the good things that happened for the year. A couple of things. All you know me, I like to, center it with good news. So the first thing for lots of folks would be the mask mandate coming to an end July of this year. And a lot of people are very happy about that. Candace Santana, I agree with you. We are supposed to be talking about generational wealth. We talked about it in like a very superficial way. There are lots of things. Let me close down this image for a little bit. This show is off script, right? I have 10 things that I want to talk about, 10 top stories that I want to talk about, but we done off script. So there are a number of things that I mean to talk about and that I mean to touch on. And I'm definitely going to make sure that I tackle it properly in this year, 2023. And that's because I don't know that I'm going to continue to do this show or do this show in this format beyond 2023. I've decided that I'm taking things, either 6 months at a time, 3 months at a time, 12 months at a time. So I am committing to 12 more months of doing this current affairs analysis type thing. But I don't know that I'm going to be doing it beyond 2023. That being said, there are things that us here, the New Source family, need to get into, delve into, and generational wealth is certainly one of them. And I agree. Thank you so much for reminding me, Candace Santana. I'm seeing somebody saying Tommy say that I am deal with Toppy. Okay. All right. If you say so. I feel like I've dealt with him quite a lot. I feel like of every single formal media house and informal media house in the country, I'm the person that has dealt with the issue of Gary Griffith and the issues surrounding Gary Griffith the most. I don't know that anybody else could lay claim to have tackling the issue of the former commissioner of police in the way in which I have dealt with the former commissioner of police. But Tommy, if you feel that I haven't dealt with him, well, I gotta tell you. Right. Stacy says what? I can't deactivate my profile because we in the USA depend on you for what's going on in the country. Okay, Stacy, I will take that into consideration. OC says, I'm grateful for being a part of this New Source tribe. Let me add that to the broadcast so everybody to see. Osei, thank you. Because I notice on social media, certainly on Facebook, we're being called a gang a lot, right? New Source and she gang, Rhoda and she gang. And I was like, really though? That's the angle they want to come with now? That's how they look into position things, that myself, and the folks who show up to have conversations, discussions, all kinds of conversations and discussions on my page, we are now a gang. Well, if that's the case, I plan to be the best gang leader in Trinidad and Tobago. I am going to be the gang leader to cut trail for all of the other gang leaders, to show gang leaders how to gang. Right? I will be the gang in gang leader. So I ain't even bothering to take them on with that. So yeah, I'm happy to be ahead of the gang. Was that bring back Jason Julian? Yes, I plan to bring Jason Julian back on. Of course, I have to write to his CEO, well, the person who's senior to him, to get permission. But for the most part, Jason Julian is very, very keen to come back and talk to us about money and things to do with money, right? So that's gonna happen. So let me try and get back on track. Yeah, Leonard, I agree. I like this gang too. I like this gang plenty. Where am I, boy? Where I reach? Right. Good news. So the first thing is the mask mandate. You don't have to wear masks. But you know what I want to say to all you? You see, for this carnival season coming up here, I mean, personally, I feel like once you're going outside in public to be around plenty people anywhere, put on a mask. Because me know how I get this flu yet, because I'm there thinking to myself, but I haven't really been around people. And then I thought to myself, you know what? There were a couple days when I was out in public around a lot of people, one. Then I had a lot of workmen in my place recently because I did some renovations. And I wasn't always wearing my mask. And because I was not always wearing my mask, I feel that's why I picked up, this thing that I picked up. So I have decided January 2023, I am going back into mask wearing mode once I am out the door. I am mixing matters. Not the way I felt the last couple days, the last week or so with this flu. It was not pleasant at all. I was so miserable. It wasn't funny. Hey, I just see Beachy. So I was supposed to toast everybody when I said Happy New Year. So Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. I am having coquito, courtesy Anthony Morgan Beach, also known as AJ's Cakes. Oh my goodness. Barbara, you see that one sun badam thing without a mask? It's serious. It's real serious. 1 minute I good. Next minute, what is going on with my throat, boy? Next minute, sore throat. After that, flat on my back and feeling like I can't breathe. That's one of the things about this flu, feeling like you can't breathe. Well, it's done 20 past the hour and me even reach the first issue yet. So, right, mask mandate. Then, what's the next thing? Oh, Jareem. We had Jareem on this program. Jareem is the individual of the year. And I felt that Jareem's performance as a sportsman and as a person in 2020 was one of the things that we needed to be very happy about, very pleased about. And so he was a bit of good news and a lovely bit of fresh air. Another thing, I have a picture in boot, but I am planning to probably picture in boot because I know it have people that get real irritated when they see pictures of in boot. But the budget was finally balanced, and I think it's important to note that the last time we had a budget that was in surplus was 2009, somewhere thereabouts, and from then to now we have been in a budget deficit, and in some instances very high budget deficits. And now we are finally in a position where we are back where the budget is not just balanced, but revenue is more than expenditure. Not by much, just $1 billion, but revenue is currently more than expenditure. So we're making more money than we're spending. And that is the first time that has happened in about, I think 13 years, 13 to 14 years. So I think that's a bit of good news. And that's something that we should be happy about. And hopefully, that will continue. The other bit of good news, and it only happened today, at least I was only aware of it today. The Manzanilla Road that was closed down because of the flooding that occurred in the last couple months of the year is going to be reopened tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow at around, at 11 a.m., right? So 11 o'clock tomorrow, the road is going to be open. But all you know, Trinidadians ain't joke worthless and joke lawless. Would you believe that the road that they just repaired, the road that had washed away, that people couldn't drive down, that they were clamoring about and complaining and saying the road need to fix and the government didn't want to fix the road has been repaired. The road is supposed to be opening officially tomorrow, and our lawless citizens have been moving the barriers and driving down the road that is under repairs. Why we always had to be doing the most? Why we always have to push things over the edge? The very road that we know corrode and wash away. Why would we do something like that? The road now fixing. The road ain't open back up yet. Any case. So the road is going to be open tomorrow. And I felt that was some swift work, that the road, was repaired and back in a condition that can be used by motorists. And it would have been, less than a month that all of these repairs took place. So big up to the Ministry of Works and Transportation. I hope that the road is successfully opened tomorrow. And please, Trinidadians, I can't even say Tobagonians because the road not in Tobago. But let me just say, please, Trinbagonians, oh God, let's stop doing the most now. Stop. We don't have to be so lawless all the time. Yes, Debbie Davidson, we did put some money back in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, about $1 billion. Was it over 2 billion? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, so we put in almost, I think it's almost 2 billion TT dollars. I have to go back and check that tweet. But we put in we put money into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and that is good news that we are servicing the fund. So let's get into some of the top stories for the year that would have rocked the nation, that would have been important. So the first story would be the stories rather. I want to look at these two stories of two little boys, both that were drowned, and in both instances, the way in which the stories were dealt with are very different in the public domain. So you had Kimani Francis in the early part of the year, and then you had little Alan Ramdial, towards the end of the year. And when both stories broke, of course, everybody was hurt, thinking, please let it not be a situation. In the case of Kimani, please let him not be dead. Same thing with Alan Ramdial. Please let him not be dead. In both situations, you had two little boys, two toddlers, who in the blink of an eye got away from their parents and ended up in river systems where they died. In the case of Kimani Francis, a neighbor saw him walking down the street and apparently didn't do as much as she should have done, or as much as we think she should have done, to be able to save or protect the young boy. In the case of Alan Ramdial, where his parents live, or where the mother was living with him, is very close to the Ottawa River, and so he got into the river and drowned. There are a couple of things that struck me about this story. One, little children and how we look after little children, and the ways in which we neglect or don't neglect the care of children in the country. The other thing that struck me was the way in which the media positioned both stories. In the case of Kimani Francis, Kimani's parents and the neighbor who saw Kimani were almost immediately demonized, and to the point where the neighbor who saw Kimani actually had to deal with death threats. And there were a number of stories in traditional media and on social media where the public was blaming everybody they could have blamed in this Kimani scenario. On the other side, with Alan Ramdial, there were whole headlines in the newspapers saying, don't blame the mother, don't victimize the mother, don't attack the mother. Those are my words. And there was a far more sympathetic stance on the whole issue of Alan Ramdial's death and how to position the mother and the mother's neglect, as it were, in this situation. And I thought, how odd that in the case of Kimani Francis's death, we felt it was okay to attack Kimani's family, Kimani's villagers, the neighbor in the village. And then when it was the situation with Alan Ramdial, very similar situation of not paying attention, child getting away quickly, then the child ending up dead as a result of lack of supervision. There was an entirely different approach. So I looked at the approach in media and I said to myself, look at how these media houses just gaslight this nation. And throughout this evening, you are going to hear me speak regularly about media gaslighting the population with the way in which they cover stories. There's something I should show you all. I want to show you the kind of work that went into preparing the show this evening. While I'm waiting for this thing to come up properly, let me continue to chat. So it's one of the first things that I noticed, the way in which we treated with that story, the Kimani story. All right, let me just switch my screen. Because, listen, I have a researcher. I had to say big up to my researcher, right? My researcher, she ain't no average researcher. So we're looking at the Kimani story, right? Kimani and Alan. I told my researcher that I'm going to be doing a year in review with Olia. Let me pull up myself here. Olia, see how many pages I just scrolled through? I tell my girl, year in review, pull together the stories and them for me. And she pulls together, for each of the things I'm going to talk about here this evening, she pulls together every single story that the media would have published. Every single story. Both on the Kimani issue as well as the Alan Ramdial issue. So when any noise all you're hearing in the background, there is fireworks going off, right? Right now somebody is currently letting off something that sounds like a bomb in the background. Where is the... this is the before you judge this 19-year-old. This particular story is the story that I felt was interesting. So Carolyn Kissoon does this story called Before You Judge This 19-Year-Old. And the story gives Christiana Ramdial's entire life story, right? Entire life story is given. Now, I want to make something clear. I don't agree with judging the parents of either child. I don't agree with judging the neighborhood, the village of either of the deaths for a number of reasons. We don't have the full story. We don't know what took place. It's fair for people to be hurting, for people to be in pain, for people to want for these children to be alive. But I also think, because these are stories where we have to be reliant on reporters and editors, third party for information, then no, we shouldn't be judging. But media shouldn't be playing judge, jury, and executioner for who the public should feel sympathy for and not feel sympathy for. Because the way in which Kimani's story was covered versus the way in which Alan Ramdial's story was covered, media manipulated who we should be feeling empathy for. And invariably, when the complexion resemble mine, and the hair like mine, and the features like mine, there is less empathy given. So black people, black families, somehow don't seem to be worthy of empathy when tragedies like these take place. And other groups are worthier of empathy. So we demonize black families, we demonize black people when anything negative happens, but everybody else deserves understanding and empathy. Why? Why is that? And it's one of the things that I noticed with how media was reporting in 2022, and I wasn't thrilled about it at all. So when all you see are jamming them in 2023, know why. So that's the Kimani Francis story. The next story was one that we break here in News Source, right? So we broke this particular story. Wait, boy, I didn't put up the image for that just now. Let me bring up an image for you for this thing, right? Because kill me dead. I thought I had... Right. Right. There we go. Right. So, in camera. In 2022, we right here, this gang, this New Source gang, we bust this. We bust this. Because, as those of you who just be following the program regularly, will remember that Robert Sabga jump out he whole self, put a story in The Guardian that Annalisa Paul wrote. It was a Sunday. And the story, the headline was a very salacious headline about P&M businessmen or P&M financiers being behind a pedophile ring, and he had done this report, and the report had and the report was, so incendiary that they had to hide the report, and it was a cloak and dagger thing where he had the report in a car trunk and he handed it over to Manohar Ramsaran in a car park from his car trunk, blah 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 blah. So when that story busts in the papers that Sunday, I watch the story and I say, okay, this thing have bacchanal. And the story never named names, it never gave any details. It was just a lot of innuendo, right? Plenty salacious innuendo. Then eventually, your girl gets she hand on the report. But here how I managed to get my hand on the report. Not too long after that story burst, story bust, about a month to 6 weeks afterwards, there was a bacchanal about the Children's Authority report, or a report that came out from the ministry that dealing up with social services and stuff. The report was talking about all of the abuse that taking place at these homes and nobody dealing up with the issues. So I had done a couple posts that wherein I was saying to Minister Ayanna Webster Roy, better than that. You have been in the position for however many years, because she is the minister within the office of the Prime Minister responsible for gender and child affairs. So I am there saying, you in this ministry for however long is not a good look that you still come in to say, well, this is happening and we're not sure what is going on. So Minister Webster Roy reached out to me after, I read some pong and she on social media. And she asked me, if I was willing to have a conversation with her. So I said, sure. So we started talking. And she was saying that the report that she had tabled in Parliament, she was hoping that that report would then put her in a position where certain investigations could take place, and hopefully they would be able to get their hands on this 27-year-old report. I say, what? She said, yes, there's a report 27 years old from since under the UNC time, and they've been asking for the report and they can't get their hands on the report. And to her understanding, the report chronicles and details a lot of abuse that was taking place at these homes. And once they have the details from all of those reports together, police investigations can be launched. So I start to put out my feelers, and somebody managed to get their hands on some of that report. And the report, well, all in all, the breeze just blow here in Diego Martin. A strong breeze blow, and the pages on them reach down by me. So then we went through the report right here on News Source, and eventually I put up some of the pages of the report on social media, and one of the victims from 27 years ago reached out to me, and I interviewed him right here. All you sit down right here with me and listened to that interview. Here's the thing, and this is what disturbed me about that story this year. Before I had my hands on that Robert Sabga report, media interviewed Robert Sabga several times. They allowed Robert Sabga to say all kinds of nasty, insupportable things. Let's listen to let's listen to one of the things that Robert Sabga had to say, right? And when he said what he had to say, I said to myself, we real good in this place, Look at the things we will allow somebody to. Wait, boy. Wait. Just now. Kill me that I had saved that in this. Aha. Here we go.
Why you left in 97, Mr. Sabga? Why you left the country?
I was posted to Canada, and that's, just this morning, another bit of nonsense from Camille Robinson Regis, of all people, appears in the Express. I practically threw my phone against the wall when I read it. Unbelievable. Of all people, she should know better. This report was finished and handed in July of 1997. Pay attention, July of 1997. On the 7th of August, 1997, I left Trinidad and assumed my position as High Commissioner to Canada on behalf of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. People have tried to float this narrative that I was sent to Canada for me to be shut up so that the report could be suppressed. It was some kind of reward for my being, for my keeping my silence and all. Rubbish! Camille, I'm telling you this to your face. You're a liar. And you, of all people, should know that because you served in the same position. You, in fact, called me.
The interesting thing is that up to now, Robert Sabga can't explain to anybody why he did nothing with the report. So he was quick to get onto programs and call people liars. He was quick to get onto programs and attempt to implicate the sitting government. But at no point in time did he talk about the government that he worked with, that he worked under when he did the report. And he cannot, up to now, explain why he never submitted the report for public scrutiny and why the report never got into the hands of the TTPS for an investigation. He claims that the report was made public. There's no evidence that the report was made public. He claims that the report was laid in Parliament. There is no evidence that the report was ever laid in Parliament. So here was this report that you were commissioned to do. Here is this report that you presided over. Here is this report wherein you went and you did all of this investigation on all of these children's homes. And in that report, at least 30 children were said to have been abused in at least one home, right? So in that report, it indicates that at least 30 children from one home was abused. There were other homes where abuse took place, but at least 30 children, and you all did nothing with it. You sat on it. So when the mark bus here, and we started to talk about it, and we start to point out, look, Robert Sabga knew what was going on. Look, Robert Sabga did this report, and it wasn't just him alone. It's him, Diana Mahabir Wyatt. I've forgotten the names of the other persons, but there were several persons, right? About 5 persons who were part and parcel of this report that occurred in 1997 under the United National Congress. Kamla Prasad Bisessa served in that government. Ramesh Lawrence Marad served in that government. Basdev Pandey served in that government. Manohar Ramsaran served in that government. A whole slew of persons served in that government. And not one of them, up to now, could answer why and say why this report was never placed in the public domain, why this report didn't make it into the hands of the TTPS, and why all of the homes where they found abuses taking place, why were none of those homes shut down? Why was no disciplinary action taken? Nothing happened. and the report was stifled for 27 years. Right? 27 years. We discussed that here. The minute we discussed the report here, the minute we revealed the report here in the public domain, the story died in mainstream media. Mainstream media didn't want to run with the story no more. Mainstream media didn't want to ask nobody any hard questions. Mainstream media seemed to be friending with the opposition to stifle the findings in the report. As soon as we put evidence from the report here in News Source and we talk about what is went on in that report here in mainstream media, the story died, because the story could no longer be about PNM and pedophiles, which is how the story was launched. That's how Robert Sabga kicked it off, right? PNM and pedophiles. The minute the other side of the story started to come out and you realize that the other side of the story implicated the opposition in having suppressed a report for 27 years, there was no interest. And that's something you're going to see a lot of in these stories we're looking at from 2022. And I would imagine we're going to see a lot of that in 2023. The minute the other side to the story comes out, the minute the side that media not interested in airing comes out, interest in the story is lost. Traction is lost. Nobody going to be covering the story anymore. The minute the story no longer fit in their narrative, whatever their narrative is. So that was the Sabga report of 1997. Where I reach now, boy. The next big story for the year was the Ram story. And of course you all know the hullabaloo surrounding that. It was Gerald Ramdean, Annan Ram Logan, Vincent Nelson. The allegations being that Ramdean would have, that Vincent Nelson passed bribes on to Annan Ram Logan via Gerald Ramdean. And Nelson apparently signed some indemnity with the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and felt that the government had breached their end of the agreement, and so Nelson has taken the government to court. So there's a civil case against the government, and as a result of that, Nelson refused to testify in the matter against Ramdean and Ram Logan. And so because Nelson has refused to testify in that matter, it means that the state's case against Ram Logan and Ramdean has collapsed. And this whole bacchanal with Nelson, the indemnity agreement, and the civil suit against the government would have been something that was in train from late 2021 over into 2022. And my understanding is that in the aftermath of the filing of the civil suit against the state, that's when we had a shuffling of the cabinet and a new attorney general. Because the matter is still before court, and when I say the matter is still before the courts, I mean the civil suit is still before the courts. I don't want to get into this much further, but I'm sure you all know we discussed it here at News Source. I went into great detail. We looked at the indemnity agreement. We looked at the timeline of stories. We looked at Nelson's affidavit, and we talked about all of the details. So you can go back and look for that particular program, Ram at Double Palm. Again, thanks to Tech Guy. Big up to Tech Guy for his extraordinary artwork. You can go and take a look at the program there if you want to get more details about this whole Vincent Nelson saga, right? So that was that. Number 4, FUL. And of course, my boy Shagari. I don't need to get into too much where this is concerned. And that's also too because the whole business of the FUL report and the audit into FULs, that's still going on as well. And I don't want to muddy any waters. It's not continue to muddy waters. I just don't want to muddy any waters at all. You all know how I feel about Toppy here on this program. You all know that for more than a year, there was a lot of contention between myself and he. At that point in time, he was the sitting commissioner of police. He is now the former commissioner of police, trying to be commissioner of police again, trying to be a politician, trying to lead a political party, and apparently trying to win popularity contests in Grenada. So I don't know if that means that Gary is going to be giving up Trinidadian citizenship and moving to Grenada. I don't have a problem with that. He can move to Grenada. Grenada can take Gary. Gary can go there and try and run Grenada. Me never issue with that at all. But we did have a lot of fun with Shagari last year. We did. We had a lot of fun with Shagari. I mean, you know, the tote where he and the FUL thing is concerned is epic. One of the things we did discuss here, where he and Firearms are concerned, we got our hands on a recording of a meeting that took place between members of the TTPS and firearms dealers in the country. And we sat right here, 2 lives in a row, listening to that meeting and the things that were said at that meeting. And what was disconcerting for me is that in that meeting, members of the TTPS and members of the Firearms Dealers Association were openly discussing the expansion of a gun industry in Trinidad and Tobago. 2021 into 2022 saw an explosion, an expansion in terms of guns, who was getting FULs, who got variations on FULs, the number of gun ranges that were shooting up, sorry, bad pun there, that was just cropping up left, right, and center. And so, while I'm not going to get into any lengthy discussion about Shagari this evening, I just wanted to note that FUL, the whole FUL story, that was a big thing for 2022, and I feel quite certain that guns, legal, illegal, and the alleged gun industry, that's going to continue to be a big issue in 2023. And I intend to get into those issues once, the time and information permits, right? The other major thing was the Pennywise robbery. There was the whole huge Pennywise hit that took place. And I feel, given what was important about that hit is its brazenness. And it's something, I'm sorry to have to say it, I don't often discuss crime a lot on my social media pages, and I don't often discuss crime a lot on News Source. When I say I don't discuss crime a lot, I don't talk about random criminal acts a lot. I will talk about the root cause to a crime. So one of the things that we're going to be getting into very soon in the coming season will be the illegal gun trade and what contributes to the illegal gun trade. So I'll faster talk about things that will help you to understand how the trade works, how the trade takes place. But I won't be focused too much on a specific crime that would have occurred. Part of the reason I don't focus on specific crimes is that it have 1,000,001 Facebook pages and WhatsApp groups. When the day come, they spend a lot of time just churning out these stories, sometimes with proper information, sometimes with inaccurate information, but they are all day long, every day, churning out these stories that has the entire population anxious, nervous, and frightened. I have WhatsApp on my phone, and I'm in a couple of those WhatsApp groups where they're constantly sharing information back and forth, right? And these are groups that call themselves citizens groups and crime watch groups and whatever else have you. And when you sit down, sometimes I pick up my phone and I'm flipping through my picture gallery because I might be looking for a picture to share with somebody or to post up or something. And as I'm scrolling through the picture gallery, all of a sudden I will be stumbling upon pictures of dead bodies in all kinds of different forms, right? What gory, what cut way, what blown way, all that kind of thing. And I said to myself, I don't want to be the sort of social media personality that is only interested in the shock value of something. So I'm not going to be the person that's coming here to show you gory pictures ever. I'm not going to be the person who is posting those images and cycling and recycling that kind of news on a daily basis. I'd faster be interested in talking about what has led to a crime, what is going on with respect to the investigation of a crime, and whether or not the crime has been solved. But I don't need to be adding to the country's anxiety. There are more than enough pages that's spending 24/7 time putting out those videos, putting out the pictures, putting out the stories. I don't need to be covering that. But when I get an opportunity, I will sit here with the information, hopefully with the with persons who are willing to be interviewed, and talk about the crime situation and what is leading to it. So I'm trying to line up some interviews with the TTPS. All right, hopefully they will agree and have that interview with me. But I want to talk to some of the heads of units of different parts of the TTPS to talk about the crime situation so people understand better the numbers that you are seeing. When you see 600 murders or however many murders it was for the year, you understand what is contributing to that, what is leading to that, and how careful, how mindful we need to be about our day-to-day activity. But you're not going to get me sharing the videos and sharing the gory pictures at all. Stella dead to the world, and I have to be very grateful for that, because fireworks going on outside there, so by now she would have normally bust out of here and gone to lie down in a cupboard far away. So I'm surprised that she's still here. So the Pennywise robbery took place, and it was incredibly brazen. Brazen in the planning, brazen in the execution, and brazen in the way in which, in the level of desperation, I would say, that took place with the robbery itself. What was also stunning, and since the robbery we've heard nothing about it, what was also stunning is how underprepared the security forces were. So you had security personnel moving money, huge sums of money, in a regular pickup truck. Not an armored truck, but a regular pickup truck. And since that robbery took place, we have not heard anything about the security company and whether the security company has changed its processes for money pickups and drop-offs, for transportation of money. We've not heard anything. No mainstream media house, because I didn't cover this story here on News Source. I didn't cover it. I didn't get into any in-depth discussion about the Pennywise robbery and what took place with the Pennywise robbery. I didn't do that. But if I am to do something like that, I would want to talk to the security company and ask the security company, why aren't you accepting liability as well for the deaths of your officers? Because to me, if a security company willing to send people out there to move money and they're not properly equipped and they lose their lives, the security company is just as liable as the bandits that shot these people. Well, I can't even say bandits, I have to say murderers. So the robbers that murdered the security officials, they are liable, they're culpable, yes. But the security company just as culpable, because they didn't make sure that their staff, their personnel, was properly equipped for the job that they went to do, right? And you're going to hear me a little bit later on talk about yet another company that didn't ensure that its employees were properly equipped for a job that they had to do. So let me see where we at with the story. We know that some of the fellas who were involved in the heist, they can't find them. Police can't find them, right? So right after they paid bail, they've disappeared. Nobody knows where they are. One suspect has been rearrested and charged with the robbery, and that's the soldier Ismail Salam. But the other persons that were involved in the robbery that were caught, they have since paid bail and they have absconded. Was that the Estate Police Association suing Allied? Good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear that they're being sued, because what they did was nothing short of criminal. To send people out there to transport cash and they're not properly equipped or properly trained to deal up with what they had to deal up with. One of the other stories from 2022 that I think is going to spill over into 2023 is the Attorney General. So, was it March of this year, March 16th, thereabouts? Reggie Armour became our Attorney General, and he became our Attorney General, as I told you all, after the Bacchanal with Vincent Nelson take place. We had a cabinet reshuffle, and with the cabinet reshuffle, we get a new AG, and he has had nothing short of an interesting year. I, like many other persons, thought, okay, good choice, because he has a lot of experience. I think he's a very reasonable and fair-minded person, lots of integrity, very solid track record as a lawyer. As a matter of fact, if he was not now Attorney General and I felt somebody needed to have senior counsel recommended to function for them, I would say Reggie Armour, senior counsel. Mama, you okay? You all hearing that noise? Okay, she can't take it anymore. She's gonna head into the bedroom. You going in the bedroom? Okay, yeah. She's going to the bedroom. She's gonna go and hide in her special space. All of this noise sounding like it right outside, you know. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And people think this is normal and this is okay. Right. So, the first piece of bacchanal, not too long after he became Attorney General, because this when the story happened, boy, was the Piarco Airport corruption case. Turns out that the sitting Attorney General was part and parcel of the case 20 years ago. And because he was part and parcel of the case 20 years ago, as Attorney General now, he had to recuse himself from the state's case against Ish and Steve. And according to the Attorney General, he forgot. There were details he didn't remember. He became involved in the state's current case against Ish and Steve, and so because of course he's the Attorney General, and so that blow up big time. And the next thing you know, the Law Association was calling for him to step down as Attorney General. Well, that I think got sorted, but he has continued to have a very eventful year. And I'll read a clip from Rhea Tate's story in the Express of the 27th of December. So the main drama at the time of his appointment as Attorney General on March 16th of this year was the circumstances in which Reginald Armour emerged. That is, he had replaced Faris Al-Rawi, a move which attracted varying political interpretations. Many thought the country was in for an uneventful tenure with Armour, a non-politician and a distinguished attorney of 40 years standing, whose life was controversy-free. Little did they know that shortly after he sat in the AG's chair, he became the central figure in an imbroglio which led to the Law Association discussing a no-confidence motion against him and a motion calling on him to resign his appointment. And of course, he would have found himself at a number of press conferences facing off with members of the media, most notably Darren Bahau. I remember Darren Bahau from the Newsday going to a press conference, and the Attorney General was there to discuss one particular issue, and Darren Bahau was there focused only on the Ish and Steve issue, and basically saying that Amo should be considering stepping down. He had even written a story indicating there was a story that he had written about the Ish and Steve situation that was in part flawed. That's the best way for me to put it. And I felt that the story assumed a certain number of things. I talked about it, commented on it, assumed a number of things about the Ish and Steve case. This is, of course, when they felt that the case was that the case had collapsed, and remember the Piaco inquiry case. So let me slow it down because I feel like jumping left, right, and center. The Piaco inquiry case. They're like 4 parts to it: Piaco 1, Piaco 2, Piaco 3, Piaco 4, and one part of it, I think, collapsed. And the way in which the story was written was to suggest that the entire thing had collapsed, 1, and 2, that the case that was the charges on Piaco 1 couldn't possibly be laid again. And I had asked, how could the reporter jump to those conclusions and make those assertions without the office of the DPP itself coming out and saying that? So, in any case, the point of the matter is Reggie Amo has had a very interesting year, and I imagine, based on the number of matters that we still have before the courts that involve members of the opposition, because what you're going to notice is that the cases that make it into headlines, the cases that make it into the public domain, the cases that you have media hot and sweaty under the collar for, are only the cases that involve the opposition or supporters of the opposition. There are lots of other cases you ain't getting nobody talking about it in the public domain at all. What's the next thing? Scrap iron and the ban on scrap iron. The scrap iron industry came under a lot of scrutiny this year. The story that I think a lot of people go with is the one about the church bell. But for me, what resonated was the way in which these scrap iron thieves, these scrap iron bandits, kept damaging public utilities. So telephone wire, electricity wire, cables for all kinds of things, cables for barriers, any metal at all they could get their hands on. They were stealing it and taking it to scrap iron dealers. And the Scrap Iron Association kept pretending that they were unaware of these things. And then, in the next breath, when the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago decided there was going to be a ban, then you're hearing that scrap iron is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I'm there thinking, a multi-billion-dollar industry? They're paying taxes. They're registered as businesses. The employees paying NIS and health surcharge and PAYE. What is going on here? How is it that this is a multi-billion, not multi-millionaire, multi-billion-dollar industry, and this industry hurting the population? Church bells missing, cables missing, manhole covers missing, utility lines and wires missing. People can't have internet because the scrap iron thieves have cut down utility wires. And then the minute a ban is imposed, you're hearing multi-billion-dollar industry and people starving because now they can't sell, they can't trade scrap iron. And when I hear it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, I want to know, well, where are these registered companies? Where the corporation tax? Where the PAYE? Where the NIS? Where the health surcharge? Or is it that we, the regular taxpayers, continuing to tote the burden of yet another illegal industry? So I feel the scrap iron industry, they're going to be making it into the news again in 2023. And we need to look at illegal industries. All of these illegal type businesses that stick around, entrench themselves, and then legitimize themselves at the expense of the rest of the public. Because it's the rest of us who does be hurting when these illegal activities become legalized activities. And if we stay quiet on these things, we're going to end up being on the receiving end of a lot of abuse. Take waiters are telling you. So the other thing was what, boy? Tobago love. There was so much Tobago love this year. Farley and Watson Duke, and trust and believe. 2023, there is going to be a lot more love. Because you see that 13 independent representatives in the THA, it bunning Watson, it bothering Watson. The way in which they pull the rug out from under Watson after Watson gallery himself all over the place about this is my party and I is the owner of this party, and the way Farley and them moved there, that chess move the rest down on Watson, mark my words, Watson biding his time to see how best he could push back at the THA and get back at the THA. So the Tobago love from 2022 that took however long before it busts out in open, I am sure it is going to spill over in 2023. I also think that one of the things we have to look out for is how Farley, Augustine, and the other 12, so because Farley and the 12 would make up 13, how those other assemblymen and women are going to consolidate their power inside the THA and I guess reform or form another political party. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that particular business, Farley Lock and Barley Lock, how that's going to work out in the THA. So that's number 8. That's the 8th top story. Number 9. Hey, why this does now that need to edit? Oh, I know why. I know what's going on there. I didn't close off things. Or you could have tell me to close off things. Right. Number 9. Jack Warner. Now, all I think I'm going to talk about the World Cup. Me ain't going to talk about the World Cup. Because the World Cup for me is not the biggest issue that cropped up that involves Jack Warner. Far from it. There's a story that made the news a couple days ago. If it take a whole week to make the news, there's plenty just now. I'm trying to right. I had to close off something and I had to go and open up. I had to open up a next link here to be able to. Where is it? Found it. I'm gonna pull it up just now. 10 days ago, this story made papers. But you see, it's the kind of story that media really want people to get excited about. Because this story, in my opinion, is one of the biggest stories to be published for the year. And it is a story that indicates that Jack Warner was the mastermind behind Cambridge Analytica being in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, when this story broke in the papers, I was actually tempted to do an entire live on it, and let me say why. I don't know how many of you know that when the United National Congress became the government, the People's Partnership became the government in 2010, one of the first things they did was change up the visa requirements to people from Russia coming to Trinidad and Tobago. When Kamla Persad-Bissessar was running for the elections in 2010, this is when Kamla Persad-Bissessar was opposition leader, right? So she was the head of the United National Congress, she was the leader of the opposition. When Kamla was running as the head of the United National Congress, and of course the lead person in the People's Partnership in 2010, there was a security team around her. Every time she got up onto a stage to speak at any of those events, Kamla had a team of Russian security guards with her. I know this because I was present at the meetings. I would attend those meetings in person back in 2010, and I would be looking on and I would see these very foreign looking, and they're very Eastern European looking, right? Their features are very, very, very distinctly Eastern European features. So I remember asking members of the United National Congress back then, who are these guys? And I was told that they were security from Russia, like Russian security officers, and they were brought in, hired by the party at that point in time to provide her with security, because the impression given is that, because she was running in the election and challenging the sitting government for leadership, that she was under so much of a threat, right? Good. Kevin, I'm seeing you saying that it was bundled in with India and Russia. I want to throw in something else. India, Russia, and Turkey. There are at least two countries at that point in time where there were certain visa arrangements made. One was Russia, one was Turkey. So persons from Turkey can come to Trinidad and Tobago for 90 days without a visa, and we can go to Turkey for 90 days without a visa, right? And I believe the same thing holds with Russia. Russians can come here for 90 days without a visa, and we can go to Russia for 90 days without a visa. I could tell you for absolute certain that it works with Turkey because I went to Turkey. So yes, so let me get back to my story. So Kamla had Russian security around her during the campaign period. And it was part of creating this image of her as a leader, right? An important leader. Because remember, Patrick Manning would have special branch around him when he was getting on a stage and presenting a speech. And so the opposition felt that it needed to position Kamla Persad-Bissessar in much the same way. And so there would be these foreign-looking security personnel on stage, or escorting her on stage, and then positioning themselves in the various corners of the stage while she was presenting her speech, right? So jump forward now to this year. We've spoken about Cambridge Analytica here very often. As a matter of fact, on the New Source page regularly, I point out the features of Cambridge Analytica and the things that are taking place with the opposition, with the media, with things in general. This story bus 10 days ago. And in a serious country where we know the impact of Cambridge Analytica on the country, this should have been a much bigger story. And it was not treated as a bigger story. So let's go through it. Disgraced former FIFA Vice President Jack Warner personally funded an ethnically divisive disinformation campaign in Trinidad and Tobago designed by an election engineering firm to discourage black Trinidadians from voting. This is the opening sentence of the story, right? And so it's written partly by a woman from Eastern Europe, Anushka Delis, from an organization called OCCRP Austro, and Mark Bassant, right? So Mark collaborated with her, but from my reading of the story and then going to her pages and links, the majority of the research was done by Anushka Delis. So it goes into talking about Warner fighting extradition to the United States, but let's get into the Do So campaign. However, his involvement with the Do So campaign led by SCL, the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, has never before been revealed and was only uncovered following a nearly 4-month investigation by OCCRP partnered with the Trinidad Guardian. The campaign, which may have swayed Trinidad's 2010 election in favor of his United National Congress Party, used graffiti, billboards, and music videos to suggest to black Trinidadian youth that they shouldn't vote. Warner has consistently denied to the local media over the last few years his alleged involvement in the Do So campaign run-up to the 2010 election. And so I want to urge all you to go and read this story, please. I will put the link back up on News Sources page this evening so that all you could find it and read it, right? I want all you to go back and read this story. The story is long, but it gives you all of the details of how Jack Warner. Let me read some of it for you. Long before Cambridge Analytica would enter Trump's orbit, Nix was busy working in the Caribbean under the SCL banner. That's Alexander Nix. Sven Hughes, the former head of elections for SCL, said the firm had worked in Trinidad before under the leadership of Nigel Oakes, who had already established contacts with an opposition party. At the time, a lot of contractors worked on campaigns in the region, he recalled. It was just which election is next, and you get passed around. SCL spotted an opportunity to put an opposition party in power in Trinidad, which they saw as more advantageous. A fresh breath in government meant fresh deals, he noted. Hughes said that one night in April 2010, he and Nix waited in a rundown hotel room in Port of Spain until they received a 3 a.m. phone call from Warner's lawyer, Lala. Right? So I want to remind all of this. Manning called the election in April. I don't know if you all remember that. April, I think around April 24th, maybe, somewhere thereabouts. 2010, early April 20th, I think, around that. So April 2010, Manning calls a snap election, and the election election will then take place the 24th of May 2010. Let me continue. So Hughes said that one night in April 2010, he and Nix waited in a rundown hotel room in Port of Spain until they received a 3 a.m. phone call from Warner's lawyer, Omlala. Okay, Anthony Morgan Beach is saying it's April 9th he called the election. Thanks, Beach. Telling them they could head over for a secret meeting. The four convened in Warner's FIFA regalia-clad office and made a plan. Warner gave us a tour of his various FIFA medals, photos, posters, and then we got down to business. They agreed that SCL would run what it called a groundswell guerrilla marketing campaign ahead of the 2010 Trinidad primaries to show the United National Congress what SCL could do and that Warner would pay for it. Later, Warner would use his influence to get party leader Kamla Prasad Bisesa to meet with the electioneering firm. The hope was that SCL would be given a much larger contract of $4 million or $5 million to devise a campaign for the upcoming general election. Right. So when I get a chance, go, I guess I'll put the link up for you to find the link. Read the story tonight, please. Read it, because let me tell you why it's important. It's important because this is the first confirmation we have. We have the book. We have Christopher Wiley in the book talking about Trinidad and Tobago and what they did here in Trinidad and Tobago. This report here is the first report that confirms the name of a person associated with the then government and the United National Congress as having been directly negotiating with SCL in 2010 to rig our elections using people's personal data. Right? When I get a chance, I go in and sit down and do a new Cambridge Analytica live. Starting from back then, what we know now, back then, coming forward. But let me ask all of this. In a situation like that, when you read that story and you hear that story, you wouldn't, as a newspaper, run down that story harder, because that was a big story here. That was a big story worldwide. A big story worldwide. Madam Moringa, I see a call Gary name. Remember Gary and Jack, one of his friends. Right? So it didn't come as no surprise to me when Griffith closed the investigations on Cambridge Analytica. That didn't come as no surprise to me when that happened. When it happened, I said at that point in time, I thought that Gary was trying to cover himself more than anything else. That's what I thought was taking place. I thought he was trying to cover himself. Me didn't think that it was all is so much other people he was trying to protect. So that case gets closed. This story comes out however many years after the case has been closed, and we are hearing that somebody who would have functioned as a minister of works and then as a minister of national security was linked, was having meetings with people from SCL, and his attorney was part and parcel of it. The attorney is a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. So I thought it was really interesting, this story break, a story that as important as this break, and it only run for one day, and it ain't make no big splashy headline, and nobody did any follow-up pieces to it at all. It is almost as if they wanted to silence this story, right? It is almost as if this story was meant to be quieted, hushed up, and silenced. And you have to ask yourself, why would media, because every media house could have choose to run with this story. Every media house could have choose to cover a different angle. They didn't want to. So who determining and who deciding what the public need to know and not know? Because that's how media does position itself, as putting information in the public domain that the public needs to know, that is necessary for the public to have. So in a situation where we know in books and in documentaries, people have talked about trading our data, our information being traded for the purpose of rigging an election, all of a sudden, this particular story isn't important enough for every single media house to be running down. Barbara asking when Mark leave Guardian. Girl, this week gone here. Must see what it is yesterday I post up about it. 2 or 3 days ago he tendered his resignation. This week right after Christmas he tendered his resignation and he going over to the Express. So I looked at that and I said to myself, but don't worry, we go sit down right here one of these evenings and talk the things. And so that's the Jack Warner thing that I wanted to talk about, because I felt this story was huge and all everybody wanted to focus on was Jack Warner and the 2022 World Cup. And here was this massive story about Warner being implicated directly in the Do So campaign, and the story barely make any headlines here. One headline and that was that. And so now we get to my final story for the year. So this story, in my opinion, in News Source opinion, is one of the biggest stories that happened. There are lots of other big stories that took place. The flooding took place, and you will notice that I ain't really talk about the flooding. Because rain does fall in Trinidad and Tobago every year. People just excavate the Caroni riverbank and sell it as topsoil and manure in villages all over the place every year. We just throw trash in rivers and thing every year, and then every year everybody does want to get on shocked and stunned when heavy rainfall and all of those other things I just talked about contributes to flooding, and then we just want to wring we hand and talk about, oh God, what we going and do and how the government going and compensate we. So we will have the opportunity to talk about flooding in about 6 or 7 months time. So I need to clutter up my life right now with that. Later on in the year, I'm sure we're going to be talking about flooding all over again. But the Paria diving tragedy is something that should be one-off. It shouldn't happen ever again. And I felt it was one of the biggest stories to take place here. Not just, one of the biggest stories to take place here, because 4 lives were lost. And those 4 lives should not have been lost, in my opinion. I felt that there was a lot of irresponsibility that took place that led to the loss of life. And I also felt that there could have been even further loss of life if certain very hard and unpopular decisions were not taken. The tragedy struck, and when the tragedy struck, the way in which the narrative was fed to the population on social media, on traditional media, and by word of mouth generally was very dangerous and very disappointing. And for me, it was one of the stories this year that showed me how incredibly scary media and media manipulation can be. Because the tragedy happened on a Friday evening, and by the Saturday morning on social media, I saw people, and this is by 9-10 o'clock the Saturday morning when I started scrolling through news feeds, I saw people describing the Coast Guard as murderers. I saw people calling for the death of Coast Guard officials. I saw people calling for the death of Paria officials. One person in particular, they kept calling for the death of that person. And there was any number of statements being made, very wild and emotional statements being made And in the course of the last 2 months of 2022, so November and December 2022, in listening to the evidence being given at the Commission of Inquiry, there was a lot of clarity that came up. So there are a couple of things that I learned about this tragedy that I wasn't clear on at the start. And I was glad that I waited. I was glad that all I would have done was the one live at the start where I shared with you footage from the ROV that was sent into the pipeline after midnight of the accident, right? So the Friday evening that the accident took place, around 1 o'clock in the morning, there would have been an ROV sent into the pipeline that went all the way like about maybe 100 to 110 feet in. So it went down the vertical and then just about 10 feet across the horizontal up to where the tanks were. And I showed that video basically to establish for the public what was in the pipeline up to the tanks. And people get big mad. People wanted to kill me. People were showing up in my inbox to threaten me for showing video of the first part of the pipeline up to where diving equipment was found. That's all I showed you all. I didn't pronounce on whether people were dead or alive. I talked about diving. I talked about what was required to dive, oxygen use, and basically saying that there was a lot that we didn't know, and so we needed to wait for the inquiry to be able to arrive at any conclusions. So that video, that live, I rested down and I didn't touch the tragedy until the inquiry. And after the inquiry started, I didn't add my voice to anything at all. When we came here and I played the inquiry, I made sure that it was the testimony from Paria officials and from LMCS officials that you all were listening to. May insert myself into it at all. In listening to the testimony given from the first week down to December, here are the things that I learned. One, the reason LMCS was given the job, because one of the first things I thought was, if LMCS has a checkered past as a company, then Paria ought not to have given them the job. The first thing I learned was this. LMCS had done similar work in the past, and they had done similar work in the past successfully. And because they had done similar work in the past successfully, it is on the basis of that track record that they would have been granted the contract to do the repair works to the pipeline, right? At berth 6. So that was one thing. Why did LMCS get the contract for the job? And they got the contract for the job because they had a solid track record of having done works like that in the past and done it successfully. One of the other things that was raised, people kept saying that the Coast Guard came and stopped the rescue. Turns out Coast Guard did not stop any rescue. When the incident took place, LMCS, as the company hired to do the repair work, was also the company hired to do the diving and the rescue diving. So the rescue dive plan was the responsibility of LMCS, not of Coast Guard, not of Paria. When the Coast Guard got there, when they were called, they were under the impression that they were going to be doing search and rescue in open water. That's where they are qualified, equipped, and trained to do rescue diving. When they realized that the divers were in a pipeline, that is when they indicated to Paria and to others present that they were not equipped or qualified to dive into a confined space, to dive into a pipeline. They didn't have the equipment to go down in a pipeline. They didn't have the skills to go down in a pipeline. So they couldn't go down into a pipeline. Coast Guard also maintained that they didn't stop any rescue diving. They remained on site to assist if they could provide assistance to the divers. And some of the assistance they provided was moving of equipment back and forth from one berth to shore, and it's there in the commission of inquiry, so you can listen. Because the coxswain who was first to arrive on the scene, the coxswain explained things. Then when Lieutenant Hargraves, who was the most senior Coast Guard official to be there afterwards, when he arrived on the scene, he also explained things from his perspective. So the talk that was running on social media first thing this Saturday morning, that Coast Guard prevent them fellas from being rescued, that was a lie. You even had persons from LMCS indicating, Mr. Guerra in his testimony indicated that Coast Guard was there on their boats holding guns on divers in the water. That turned out to not be the case, because when you started to hear about who had and didn't have guns, it was not a situation at all where every single Coast Guard official who was present there was armed. You had about 13 Coast Guard officials present, and I believe only about 3 of them actually carried firearms on them. So this whole business of Coast Guard showing up and holding gun on men in the water, that was not the case. And the Coast Guard actually got there several hours after rescue diving had begun, which now leads to the question, who was doing the rescue diving? Since LMCS maintains that they were not allowed to do rescue diving, who was doing the rescue diving after the incident took place? Now, the testimony has been very, very, very interesting, because you have personnel from Kenson, which is a company in the energy industry that is working on behalf of Paria. You had testimony from their personnel. You had testimony from LMCS personnel. You had testimony from the Coast Guard. And then we had testimony from the Paria incident management team. And I want to wrap things up with part of that interview. I feel is important.
Audio, as well as the air, of course, all bundled in one thing. Did it occur to you could send a diver to get that information, that same information, the conditions of the pipe, where the plug was, where the divers were? Did it occur to you?
Ma'am,
I didn't even use the word rescue. Did it occur to you you could send a diver tethered with surface air, with video, audio, and everything to go down into the pipe to see if he could locate the divers?
you are asking me, and I have said repeatedly, you are asking me to send a man in a pipe, 30-inch diameter. I don't know the conditions in that pipe, right?
Okay, so the answer is the same as you've given already.
Okay, and
Yes, sir. I had a decision to make. This was no simple time. This was no, you see, we sit here in this room and we believe that this was just something that was not stressful, right? We believe in this room here that this was not something that we were under strain, we were under pressure, right? That is the furthest thing from the truth. And we can sit in this room and believe what we want to believe, but put yourself in that position on that night. Put yourself in that position on that evening when you have to make a decision to send a man into a pipeline a quarter of a mile long. You have no idea where this man is going. You have no idea what this man is going to face. You have no idea. You are accountable for this man. You have that accountability. Once you sanction sending that man in that pipe, you are accountable for that man's life. And if you believe in this room that that was a simple thing because we had 4 men in that pipe, if you believe that I just sat there and decided I'm just not sending a man in a pipe, right? You simply do not understand what we went through that night. That is not something I want anybody in this room or anybody at all to have to go through and to make a decision. That is not a simple decision, as we feel to believe you just send a man and pull him out with a rope. That is not a decision like that. That is that man's life. I had 4 men in that pipe. 4 men. I had husbands in that pipe. I had fathers in that pipe. I had sons in that pipe. Whose father should I have allowed and sanctioned to go down in that pipe? Again, whose son should I have allowed to go down in that pipe? Right? Whose husband should I sanction to go down in that pipe and perish? I have run this through my mind on many occasions, and I still do. And let me tell you something. I understand Mr. Kirban, because somebody is in the back is talking about whose son. I understand Mr. Kirban's courage because his father was in the pipe. I understand why Mr. Kirban will want to go into that pipe. And if I was a son, yes. But I've also looked at this on the reverse. If I was the father in that pipe, would I want somebody to send my son into that pipe after me in a reckless manner where he could perish? And every time I asked myself that question, my answer was no. I will not want anybody to be so reckless with my son's life. So if you believe in this room that that was simple for me and simple for the IMT, what would I have done? Would I have done said, well, listen, I can't get the information, just send somebody in the pipe? That would be totally reckless. Totally reckless. And then, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what we will face?
All right.
The Commission of Inquiry continues. I think they resume on either the 3rd or the 4th of January. I believe it's the 4th of January. Of course, I will be putting up updates on News Source so that you all will follow the link and follow the inquiry. It has been very telling. It has been very moving. That for me was one of the most interesting 2 days of testimony, because Colin Piper, who was the head of the incident management team at that point in time, I believe he is still the head of the incident management team at Paria, he gave testimony for 2 days. 2 days straight, 7 hours of testimony. And he was properly well grilled by a number of attorneys, and the information that came out in his 2 days of giving testimony was very, very, very interesting, to say the least. I would also urge you to listen to the other testimony that was given over the days from the LMCS dive team, as well as the team from the team of persons from Kenson. I'm not sure who else has to be interviewed or who else has to give testimony, but in this coming week the Commission of Inquiry resumes. And folks, that's where I'm gonna end with the top stories. In all of those stories, all of the stories that we looked at, for me, some of the major threads or trends has to be how media has given the story, the angles they have given, the information, or in some cases misinformation that they've given. Because for the entire year, one of the things that we've been battling with here at News Source is that most of the times the shows that I am doing and the posts that I'm putting up on social media have to do with correcting misinformation or pointing out clear biases in the work that media is doing. And so I think it's one of the things, it's going to be one of the biggest challenges that we have to face in 2023. The continued misinformation and gaslighting of the public. And so we have to be prepared for that. And we have to be prepared to equip and arm ourselves so that the gaslighting and the misinformation is not going to sway us and not going to undermine us. And when I'm talking about swaying and undermining, I know a lot of people think, or a lot of people like to think that I'm referring to it from a political perspective. No. I still don't care who all you vote for. It doesn't matter to me. You could go out there and vote for pretty much whoever it is you want to vote for. What I have a concern with is when the misinformation leads to an underinformed population that's saying and doing all kinds of harmful things to itself. So when you have a media that is only allowing one group to be worthy of empathy, or one group to be worthy of being proud, one group to be validated, and then another group not, that for me is frightening. So when there is this clear agenda and clear bias in terms of how information is being brought to the public, I have to strap on my Gideon boots and come here and talk to all you and make sure you understand what we're really playing out. So in the upcoming weeks when we resume, because after today I'm resuming middle of January. So middle of January is just now. Middle of January is, no, not next week, week after next week. So I taken a couple more, weeks of rest and recovery for myself. And then we're coming back out. And when we come back out, generational wealth, definitely looking at that. I want to look at why carnival is such a threat for people. Because I see the government announced it's spending 147 million on carnival, and all of a sudden everybody jumping out to talk about who this beat pan versus who this beat books, as if it's impossible for us to beat books and pan at the same time. But I stopped and I said to myself, why every year people has had to attack carnival so much the same way they just jump up to attack things like Emancipation Day? So we are going to be talking about carnival and why carnival is important. We're going to be talking about our art form in a very deep and meaningful way. I don't want a situation where all you come out of this new season of News Source and all you understand the importance of carnival to the psyche of Trinbagonians. People who like it and people who ain't like it, by the end of the series, must understand the importance and relevance of carnival. And if you think when I come to talk about the importance of and relevance of carnival, I'm only going to be talking about fete and soca music, you lie. It have all kinds of important cultural activities we had to discuss when we're talking about carnival and why it is so important to us. So, generational wealth, carnival, I also want to delve into mental well-being. We're going to talk about mental health and mental well-being a bit more. And of course, we will be discussing all of the oh my goodness, it flies straight out my head, you know. We're going to be talking about all of the current affairs issues now. Yes, current affairs. That's what I wanted to say. That we're going to be talking about all of the current affairs. So, you all will see me in 2 weeks' time. Of course, I'll put up something so that you'll be able to, I'll put up a notice so that you'll know when exactly I'm going to be resuming. No doubt it will be linked to work that tech guy has created for us. And until then, you all, take it easy. Thanks for joining me. Have a good week and Happy New Year.
Just hold them and walk them.